This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome in, folks, to another edition of Open Mic Night. I am your host, Noah Tluki, and on today's episode, we're going to break down these last two Lions losses. Just absolutely painful, 48-45 over Seattle, and laying a goose egg, getting zapped, if you will, by the New England Patriots 29-0. I'm going to break these losses down, and I'm starting to question a little bit now if Dan Campbell is the right guy. And I'm just going to ask the question, basically, is he going to be the guy moving forward, especially after a 1-4 start? But thank you again, folks, for tuning in. As always, I know we've taken a little bit of a hiatus just because of my busy schedule, but with the bye coming up and a lot to talk about with the Lions, definitely had to squeeze one in here for you guys here on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. But before we talk some Lions, I do want to give a special shout out to my friend from John Carroll, of course, here in Cleveland. His name is Peter Knabb. And Pete, he is a couple years older than me, and he was born with cerebral palsy, and he's been in a wheelchair for his whole life. But he has attended, he attended 123 of the 162 regular season baseball games in Cleveland this year. And that includes going on the road, not only just at Progressive Field, but on the road to places like New York, Yankee Stadium, and I think he went to Dodger Stadium. He went to Angel Stadium as well, and he went to Houston. He went to Texas when they clinched the Central Division. And really, really awesome stuff. And finally, he's been able to be recognized by a lot of the local news stations in Cleveland. He actually threw out the first pitch at the Game 1 wild card series against the Rays. And so Pete's been a diehard fan his whole life. We've been going to games together for a while now, probably the last 5 years. And finally, and he would go to a lot of games even on the road before he started getting all the news attention. And now all of a sudden, the Cleveland newspapers finally are giving him his attention that he so deserves. And being able to throw the first pitch out, and there was an anonymous lady who even gave him $1,000 donation because just for him to continue his dream of going to see Cleveland in all 32 or 30 major league parks. I think he only has 7 to go, which is absolutely insane. And he was able to actually meet the team a couple weeks ago. He got to go on the field and talk to Terry Francona and everyone like that. And it was really, really awesome to see. And the team actually even paid for his hotel and his whole flight out to New York to watch the ALDS as they play the Yankees. So, team very generous, flew him out first class, and staying at a very fancy hotel in Manhattan as well. So, it's really, really cool that he's finally getting all of this attention that he so deserves. I was actually able to go to Game 1 of the wild card series against the Rays with him when they won 2-1. Jose Ramirez had a big 2-run blast later in the ball game, but my first playoff game I've ever been to, a playoff baseball game, I should say. And just seeing him throw out the first pitch and everyone coming up to him during and after the game, really, just telling him how great of a job he did. I actually got him all warmed up in his backyard. I picked him up and took him over to the ballpark. And he does a lot of tribe talk on. He actually has his own podcast. I don't remember what it's called, but he does a radio show here at WJCU, our campus radio station in John Carroll, still, where he's actually, through some of his connections with the team, he's actually been able to get some. He got the general manager of them on once, and a couple other guys with the organization. So if you're there's probably not many Cleveland baseball fans up there in Detroit, but if you are, his show is definitely one. It airs at 7 a.m. on Saturday mornings on 88.7 WJCU. You can get that online anywhere as well. But big shout out to my friend Pete. Had to get him out there. I know we're all Tiger fans out there, but it's really good because and the other thing too is like Cleveland as an organization is everything I want the Tigers to be when it comes to player development. I know I've mentioned on the podcast before. I was actually able to intern with 2 of the teams that are in the Cleveland system: Akron Rubber Ducks, the AA affiliate, and the High A affiliate, the Lake County Captains. And, a lot of those guys that were on those teams when I interned are now up with the big league club. And just being able to see how they develop talent from, the grassroots up when they draft these guys, put them in the system. That's just something that the Tigers don't do. It's just like they go out and try to get these big names and pay them all this money. Cleveland has a very low payroll compared to the Tigers, at least in the past. And, so this is something that I really hope Scott Harris and company helps develop, gets better player development, gets better minor league development as well. And hopefully, Cleveland is just everything I want in for the Tigers in terms of all that. So hopefully Scott Harris can turn that around. That is for sure. All right, now on to the Lions talk. And, of course, Lions dropping their last two, 48-45 over the Seahawks and 29-0, laying a goose egg against the Patriots in Foxborough. Guys, look, last time we talked all about how this was after the Vikings loss, how it was just a tough loss. The Lions still look good. Number one offense in the league. Things were going good. They just their one problem was, maybe a little bit of the defense. And the game against the Seahawks, the Lions defense wasn't just bad. Like they were historically bad. They were the first team in NFL history to ever score 41 or more points at home and lose. How do you score 45 points and lose? I just wonder and look, I don't want to speculate, but are some of these guys losing faith in this regime? I just wonder, because it's like when you score 45 points, as a defense, you can't just think, oh man, the offense is just going to score a lot. We don't have to worry about defense. I don't know, man. Maybe it's just Aaron Glenn and his scheme. Maybe that's the other thing. I was thinking about that, how it might just be maybe Aaron Glenn's. And look, I'm being serious about this. Is this defense just a little too complicated for some of these guys? I mean, when I watch NFL games, I notice sometimes that, especially after big plays and whatnot, some guys on defense are pointing at each other. Like, oh, I thought I was supposed to cover this guy, or you were supposed to cover this guy. And, I've seen that sometimes with this Lions defense. And I just wonder, because in the NFL, especially, you have to, a good coach is a good teacher. And this really goes across all levels, but especially in the NFL, where these guys from college and all that are coming from all kinds of different systems. How do you teach, how do you make a defense not too the game isn't that hard. Bruce Arians has said that. All other coaches have said that game isn't that hard. But when you try to make it more complicated, that's when it becomes harder than it needs to be. And, obviously you're trying to give all these different looks and whatnot, and because there is a little bit of complexity to NFL defenses, different than, Pee-wee football or whatever. Because, if you're too predictable, teams will exploit you. So you have to mix it up. But it has to be at a level where people can understand. And maybe Aaron Glenn and his defense is just too hard to handle for some of these guys. Now, I'm not saying that that's the only reason. I think this defense lacks a little bit of talent. I think we know that. Have they gotten better in certain areas? Yes. Is Malcolm Rodriguez an upgrade at middle linebacker over, a guy like Alex Anzalone? Yes, probably. Is the D-line a little bit better on the edge with Aiden Hutchinson? Yes. Is Jeff Okudah improved? Yes. But there's just certain elements. I mean, you look at Amani Oruwariye, who was benched during the Patriots game, didn't even get the start. They went with a practice squad guy. Remember, Amani Oruwariye was a guy that Bob Quinn praised, the sixth round pick out of Penn State. And he had 5 interceptions that one year, and people were saying, oh, this could be a diamond in the rough. What's going on now? Benched. Didn't even get the start. Something is going on, especially defensively. And we have not really seen Aiden Hutchinson much since the Washington game when he had 3 sacks in the first half. He has not had a sack since. This defense still does not get pressure. And they're allowing guys like Geno Smith to throw for 320 yards against you on just 30 attempts. And Rashad Penny to go 151 on 17 carries on the ground. Then New England comes in. Bailey Zappi completes 17 of 21 passes. A lot of short throws. He threw for less than 200 yards. And then you had Ramondre Stevenson go for 161 yards. Averaged just under 6.5 yards a carry. Like, what is going on with this defense? You know, like, we all expected, I think a lot of people expected that the defense would probably be bad this year. But my problem is that when a defense becomes historically bad, that's where we get into trouble. Like when you become the first team in NFL history to score 41 points offensively and lose. That's on your defense. You can't be historically bad like that. Like this is taking steps backward. Now, am I one of those people that's going to say, I give up on Dan Campbell? He should be fired. No. But this is what I'm a little bit concerned with. Do I like how aggressive Dan Campbell is? Yes, I do. I like how he likes to go for a little bit more on fourth down than a lot of teams. But see, the thing though is I like aggression, but it has to be like controlled aggression. Controlled aggressiveness. You know, I'm at the 50-yard line facing like a 4th and 2. Let's go for it. I don't mind that. But when you have a 4th and 9 at New England's 32, 4th and 9, I don't even know what the percentage, it's probably very low of teams actually getting a first down in that situation. 4th and 9. You were down 6-0. So think about this. You probably kick a field goal that's a little bit less than 50 yards. I understand that the Lions were going with this new kicker, and you know they've been really struggling at kicker ever since he missed the extra points and all that against the Vikings and the field goals. I understand, but like, why did you even? You should have at least trotted him out there. It's less than a 50-yard field goal. Instead, and I'm listening on with Dan Miller and Lomas Brown on the broadcast, and I'm like, did Dan Miller just say that they're going for it on 4th and 9 at at New England's 32? Kick the field goal. Hopefully he makes it 6-3. No, and you know what's even worse? The Lions didn't just not get it, but Jared Goff fumbled, and Kyle Duggar picked it up and ran 56 yards the other way for a Lions touchdown. Or, I'm sorry, a Patriots touchdown. Like, it wasn't even that they just didn't get it. They fumbled away a touchdown. And at that point, I was just thinking, the Lions aren't going to win this game. They're down 13-0, and that's it. It was just devastating. And when that happened, I just was like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, it's just at the point where it's like only this happens to us. And Dan Campbell, I know a lot of times in press conferences afterwards, he says, guys, that was on me. That was on me. What else is he going to say? Is he going to blame, Jared shouldn't have fumbled. My defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn, needs to call better plays. No. He's not going to throw anyone under the bus. He's taking all the blame himself, which is probably the right thing to do. However, doesn't seem like he's fixing much. He seems like he's still his old aggressive self. But I don't mind aggressiveness, but just control. 4th and 9 at the New England 32, don't go for it. I don't care how much you trust your offense. You're down 6-0. Kick the field goal. Make it 6-3. Gives your defense a little bit more of a shot. And then you get a little bit momentum once you score some points. It's way too out of control. I don't like it. Now, when it comes to the future with Dan Campbell, see, and I was listening to Mike Valeni earlier this week, and he's talking about, football, name me why you like Dan Campbell, and is any of the reasons that you like Dan Campbell football related? And look, I'm not all about kneecap biting and all this other stuff that he says to the team and hard knocks. I'm not about that. What's Dan Campbell's scheme like? I don't know. Like, I don't know if he's more of a scheme guy or if he just has, these guys in place that, that have different schemes. Like Ben Johnson, what a great offensive coordinator hire that was, except for this last game against New England where they were shut out. But injuries didn't help as well. I'm not trying to make excuses, but, other guys were out, especially DeAndre Swift. Now, and Amon-Ra St. Brown didn't really have much either. Only 4 catches for 18 yards. against the Patriots. He was out, of course, against Seattle. They say they still scored 45 even without St. Brown and Swift, which I thought was pretty impressive. But again, Seattle's a bad team. Never should have lost that game. But what I do like about Dan Campbell is he's a guy that is here to establish a culture, trying to establish some sort of foundation, which and I understand that they got 6-year deals, Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. But I'm starting to think, like, especially if this continues. Now, you never know. After this bye, the Lions could just flip a switch and just go on a tear. But if this stuff continues, the Lions just need like a better in-game coach. Because what matters in the NFL? Wins and losses. Especially kind of like we're nearing the halfway point of year 2. Got to see some sort of improvement, not only just with the players, but with the coaching staff as well. We saw Dan Campbell get better and better as the season went on in year 1. I just think he's still, and this is the one thing about Dan Campbell, he is not a puppet. He is himself. And it seems like himself is being this very aggressive coach, going for on a 4th down a lot, not afraid to run trick plays, not afraid to throw, have Jack Fox throw a punt or throw a pass on 4th down. Stuff like that. Not afraid to onside kick it. That's just who he is. And he's not going to pretend like to be anyone else. However, I think he can control that aggression a little bit more. A little bit more. I think that'll really help in the long run. If that happens, Dan Campbell, I think, is the coach for at least for the next few years with this team. Because a lot of people forget too, Jameson Williams, whenever he's going to come back, he's a guy that will just add another weapon to Jared Goff's arsenal. Oh, and that's a whole other thing too. Is Goff the future? Look, guys, I know Goff played well the first couple games, but I just feel like the Lions weren't having success because of him. They were having success because of Swift, of the line, of the receivers around him. It wasn't like he was the guy. He's the reason why the Lions had the number 1 scoring offense for the first 4 weeks. I'm not really sold on Jared Goff anymore. And I never really was 100%. I mean, I was a little bit because I just thought, well, maybe this is a guy that, his second team went to a Super Bowl a few years ago, looking for a little bit of revenge, that kind of thing. But I just don't see it. And he go out against Dallas and throw 6 touchdowns, 400 yards. I still wouldn't think he's the guy. I just think the Lions just need a little bit more of a dynamic playmaker, a guy with a little bit of stronger arm, being able to push the ball downfield and get it to these guys, like especially for the future with Jameson Williams and some of these other guys that they have, maybe like a Josh Reynolds as well. So I don't think Jared Goff is the future. And I think a lot of this regime is it's going to depend on what happens with the quarterback. If Dan Campbell continues to not win as a head coach, it's time. He's got to go, especially if it's with Jared Goff. Goff's got to go, and Dan Campbell. Now, I'm a little bit more sold on Brad Holmes, at least at this point, because I think he's at least done enough. Getting us enough pieces offensively to, make some noise, and that's good to see. However, his errors on defense and special teams are a little concerning, especially the kicker position and the defensive line. I mean, who did he really draft? It was Hutchinson. He had the one good game. What happened to Levi Onwuzurike and Ali McNeil? Where's Josh Pascal, man? Remember Josh Pascal? Oh, 3-time team captain at Kentucky. Great guy to get off the edge. Team leader. Where's he been? Hurt? I just feel like he hasn't done enough good of getting these, especially the defensive line and the defense. Now, I'm not saying fire him now, but if this stuff continues, especially into year 3, there's a lot of concern. And I'm still holding hope for Dan Campbell. I still think that he at least gets guys to play for him. He does. But at some point, especially the veterans in this locker room, they might think, especially the guys that were here for Patricia, they might think, oh my gosh, here we go again. Bad in-game decisions. We're losing. Because no matter how much of a buy-in you get from players, if you continue to lose, like you're going to be out, especially in the NFL. So I'm hoping this is right. My other option thing too is, okay, maybe Dan Campbell's the guy that lays the foundation, builds that foundation for the guys, getting them willing to play for him, that kind of stuff, and then they let him go. Nothing wrong, Dan. Nothing wrong. We need someone to take us to that next level. Dan Campbell probably just can't take the Lions to that next level, which is winning playoff games, going to Super Bowls, NFC championships. So that's when a guy like a Brandon Staley, in my opinion, I thought the Lions should have hired last year, or at least interviewed, I should say, last year. But maybe that's a guy where he's a little bit more scheme based. He's a coach for like a win now team. Maybe that's where the Lions go in the future. So instead of it just being, Dan Campbell for this entire time, he might be, okay, the foundation, let's get guys to play for him, kind of develop a winning culture, and then let's get the Lions will hire a better in-game coach, a guy that can take them to that next step, a guy that probably has a little bit more idea of what scheme is offensively and defensively. That's who I think the Lions could hire, especially if Dan Campbell just doesn't end up working out. Because something that's important to have is continuity. And we know that the Lions are notorious for not having any sort of continuity. Firing coaches left and right, firing general managers. I mean, Stafford, when he played 12 years in Detroit, he was on, like 3 or 4 head coaches? Yeah, Schwartz, Caldwell, Patricia. So, 3. He was on a couple general managers. It's just, they need continuity. Look at the Steelers. They've had 3 head coaches since 1969. Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, and Mike Tomlin. Pretty good organization. Not having the best year right now. But, overall, that continuity breeds deep. And I think that's what the Lions are trying to establish. But you have to have the right people to establish continuity. And I think the Fords are going to be very patient with Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes. I mean, they had 6-year contracts for a reason. I understand, guys like Matt Rule had those long contracts. Now he's fired in Carolina. I mean, I don't think it's that bad. But I just think the one problem is like the in-game management. Maybe that just comes with experience. And then, of course, talent and then defensive scheme. I think, especially with Aaron Glenn, he might be a guy that is not the future of as a defensive coordinator in Detroit. And like I said before, maybe it's just too complicated because I see guys pointing fingers after plays. That's not a good sign, especially if you want to establish a defense. Lions have the bye, of course, as I mentioned, before they head off to Dallas in a couple of weeks. How about Dallas? Cooper Rush from Michigan. Lansing Catholic High School in Lansing, played quarterback at Central Michigan. He's undefeated as a starter this season, 4-0 with the Cowboys filling in for an injured Dak Prescott. But I'm assuming he's going to get the start when the Lions play him in Dallas. But, another hot team, Dallas, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But, it's tough. It's tough. I just thought the Lions would be a little bit better by this point. I'm not saying undefeated and all that. I mean, they are probably a couple plays away from being undefeated, honestly. If Goff doesn't throw those pick sixes and whatnot. But regardless, a loss is a loss, win's a win, all that kind of stuff. So, hopefully the Lions will rebound. They definitely have to change a lot, and hopefully this bye will help rejuvenate them and get them to that game when we saw them against Washington. That's a game that I want to see the Lions play. with that confidence, that energy. And I just think that there's just been too many games this year where the Lions have had that lead, blow it in the fourth quarter, lose confidence. They need to start gaining more confidence because that, I think, will help them in the long run. That is for sure. Make sure to tune into all the other great podcasts on the podcast network, the Wrestling Podcast, Doc and Jock, the Fan Report, Pistons gearing up, for a season where some people expect playoffs. So that'll be interesting in the Motor City with the whole youth movement of Isaiah Stewart, Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, and company. And Red Wings starting up as well. We'll try to get you some coverage of them going forward as well. And of course, John Macaroon, follow his amazing coverage that he does for Sports Illustrated, covering the Lions as well. Thanks again, folks, for tuning in, and make sure to tune in next week, only on Open Mic Night.